Henrik Boots, CEO of Science and Medicine Group, and I'm sitting here at the headquarters of Science and Medicine Group in Arlington, Virginia. And I'm very happy to welcome Bill Snyder next to me, the partner and co-founder of BroadOak Capital Partners.
Well, thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit more about BroadOak Capital Partners?
Sure, absolutely. We're a boutique firm that's been focused in the same niche that you have been for a while. We're about 15 years old. We have always been focused within the research tools and pharmaceutical services space. We kind of have two angles of attack on that market. One is as an investor. We've been one of the most active investors in this space over the last 10 years or so. Not the biggest, but one of the largest portfolios and most transactions. So we have a lot of connectivity to the space. And also as an advisor, we've been involved in probably over 50 M&A transactions as well. So all that, we like to say, we're narrow. If you're going to be narrow, you better be deep. So that's what we've been doing, and we have offices in Bethesda nearby, and also in San Francisco in Research Triangle Park.
Great. Well, BroadOak has a very impressive track record, so I would like to hear a little bit of how you advise the companies you're involved in as an investor, board member, etc. So in these times of economic uncertainty, how is BroadOak advising life science companies to prepare for financial volatility, particularly around capital budgeting and investments?
Yeah, you know, these days it's uncertainty is a common word. You hear a lot, and you think about it from. We have like three pillars in our space that we always look to, and often they're not really correlated with each other. And one is the government funding, the NIH budget, right, has been a stalwart. It's predictable growth, and has always been sort of a sacred budget item. And you have big pharma spending, wealthy, successful, that they're also driving R&D spend. And then you have the biotechs. They tend to be the most volatile because it has to do with their ability to raise money, et cetera. This is one of the very few times that I've actually seen kind of all three under some level of uncertainty, or a high level of uncertainty, and certainly NIH being typically the one that offset. So when investors can manage risk, but uncertainty is a tough one. So that has been an important theme for everybody, big and small, in our space.
And I want to reflect on that. So we do at Science Medicine Group, we do this survey with the Market Pulse, where we interview labs around the world. And we have seen noticeable shifts in budget allocation, but also in terms of uncertainty, particularly. Are you seeing more conservatism in instrument purchases or delays in procurement from your end?
Yeah, and I think we see it a little bit with people who are maybe involved in the SBIR grant program, so they would have that element. But more likely, we're seeing the impact coming from the way this uncertainty has affected investors, right? So we focus in the private markets, and the private markets are having a tough time with companies raising additional rounds, and even the VC funds themselves raising their next funds. So when you, with a large percentage of the companies in our space unprofitable, in order to control your destiny, you need to either know where that financing is coming from, or make sure you take the capital you have and you make it last. So that's the impact. You're seeing people coming back or dialing back some of their operating expenses various ways and purchases, and they're seeing that coming from their customers, so they're trying to. I think it's mostly stabilized now. I think that it took a little while for us all to adjust to it, but I think most people, hopefully by now, have made those adjustments. But everybody will be careful when it's time to ramp back up, because nobody likes to go through the downsize process.
So what advice are you giving your portfolio companies then when it comes to managing growth amid unpredictable cost pressures, labor, supply costs?
Well, the financing strategy is a big part of it, and so the advice tends to be that don't rely and forecast on growth in a market that is struggling with that. You got to do your work to figure out the pockets of growth. You cannot assume just because you have raised capital and hired a commercial team that you're going to see growth in a top line when the largest players in our space are struggling to do more than 5%, right? Like that's where we, I think our advice is trying to be rooted in the kind of the reality of the macro situation, which is hard because entrepreneurs are optimists by nature.
Which is great.
We need them to be.
And you mentioned a little bit of the macro environment here. As a follow-up question to that, what impact do you see from current and new regulations, proposed tariffs? We have the changes in FDA and NIH.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact M&A and valuations from an investment in the life sciences?
Well, I think I'll start with like the majority of the politics of, don't have a direct impact on our market, but there are some things that have come up at the FDA, the NIH, and with tariffs that will, and it will affect different companies very differently. So let me kind of go through those tariffs. In our world, we tend to invest in smaller companies that are more domestic oriented. It's probably going to be a positive as this is more of a threat to somebody who doesn't have a presence in the US and their need to some extent stay out of the headlines, another extent to get ready for sort of a new, call it tax regime around the globe. And so setting up a facility in the US or acquiring a US-based company might be a quick way to solve that problem. So I think there's a benefit on the smaller side. The bigger companies have spent years building their infrastructure and their supply chains overseas, and those are tough decisions now to figure out whether this is temporary or they need to rethink that. So we're definitely seeing the impact in big dollars in the bigger companies, but in terms of the majority of companies, it could be a positive for U.S. business. Within with the NIH, the interesting thing is definitely the budget is, you just can't expect it to be growth. It's become a less relevant part of the market. If you look at their growth has been less than the overall growth of the market, and therefore it's become a smaller share of total demand, if you will, but it's still the biggest single customer. So always relevant. But maybe over time, though, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to be hard to rely on that as a growth source for companies in our space. Still $40 billion is a lot of money, no matter how you look at it. But from the second order effects, it's potentially going to be shrinking. The two things, that there are, new administration comes new priorities. And so we're definitely seeing things that are focused in vaccines or mRNA as being a lot of headwinds, right? Just being able to tell their story in the face of what other headlines are. Or raising capital in those areas, that's tough. But there's a whole new area, which I'm happy to talk about, which is the rethinking of animal data and non-animal assay data being submitted as part of clinical trials. That's probably the catalyst that market needed, was to get a government position, a sort of regulatory position on it. And I forgot the last part you had asked me about.
Oh, the FDA in terms of.
Yeah, the FDA's commitment, the words are that they want to see more drugs approved, less of a regulatory impediments, focuses on advanced therapies like cell and gene therapy. These are exactly the words you would want to hear if you're investing in this space. Those are the growth areas, and there's clearly the most innovation is happening in those areas. But at the same time, the same companies who are making those are concerned about other issues with respect to drug pricing and most favored nations issues, which don't affect typically the smaller companies, but go back to my 3 pillars of the market. The wealthiest, oftentimes some of the the most sort of companies that are very profitable are having other attacks that are likely to trickle down. But our assumption is that's not ultimately a threat. I mean, that's something they can handle. Having an FDA that is kind of on board with getting advanced therapies through the pipeline, that's great news.
And as it sounds like there's a need for more private funding as other sources decline due to some of what you described. So we found, of course, all the big players, they're using a lot of market research, and Science Medicine Group is a provider of that. How do you see third-party data in terms of market research can benefit smaller companies in terms of raising funds?
Yeah, well, one area, I'm not surprised you asked that question, but one of the areas where we don't see it being used enough is around product launches. When you have a smaller company, oftentimes their entire fundraising and their whole story is about, I have a new thing that the market really needs. And they tend to back it up with more anecdotal data. And I assume you've had a similar experience where you're seeing, they could raise $20, $30 million and they're not spending, a fraction of that to make sure that they get the launch right. Like, this is the grand opening of a restaurant, right? You've got to get it right, because I'm sure there's a lot of robust projections behind that. So you wouldn't want to stumble out of the gate. That's one area where it's just not the way small companies, I assume big companies probably have a lot more of a sophisticated machinery around that. And I'm sure they're all clients, but in the smaller areas, I would think that's a big one. Because that timing and being able to get that launch right, and then if you're raising more money later, this is all, it just kind of flows, it flows naturally. And we've used your products in the past for diligence and encourage some of our companies to use it. It's just the ability to get access to, for me, my background, I've been in this field for a while, but I'm not a practitioner, right? I don't use the products. For me to get access to 100 practitioners and get quick feedback on that is better than, calling a colleague that I've known for years and say, hey, what do you think about this? That's one opinion, and probably somebody who hasn't held a pipette in years versus people who are, doing this every day. So that's always been unique for us, unique tool for us to use and think about.
Well, following up on that, as an investor, I know growth is an area of big interest, of course. Currently, today, what sectors within the life sciences demonstrate to you the most resilience in the face of inflationary pressure, global supply chain disruption? Are there any surprises? Are there any surprises that you didn't think about in your models 5 years ago?
Well, the answer to the last question is absolutely not. You know that's true, because we destroy all the models that were wrong. We can't even find them anymore. No, those are good questions. I don't know how many things actually can dodge all of those, but the AI impact in our market is very real. There's a lot of data in scientific research, and the idea, the power of these tools to help organize that and prioritize, and mistakes that you made in the past to get immediately recalled. So it's going to be an impact in recruiting, but it's also a pretty big impact in marketing. I've seen some pretty amazing tools about how people are now able to find customers and reach out to them. I know you guys are doing interesting things in that area. So that's disruptive, and even recruiting, finding talent, it's all just been squeezed down to things that used to take a lot of time, we can do a lot faster, more efficiently. Areas that I think will see growth or didn't see decline. One example would be clinical. The rate of people being diagnosed with cancer is completely unaffected by everything we talked about for the last 30 minutes. And so for our portfolio companies that were targeted to that market, we saw a more consistent flow of revenues and demand. There might be less people willing to buy new equipment in a lab, but again, the demand for the tests and the assays is going to be more stable. Another area is this, what's happening with precision medicine. It's a term that's been around for a long time. You're seeing a lot more. Some of this is the data generated, where a pathology lab maybe used to be a boring business, but now it could be a training model for AI that would really change the way care is delivered or patients are found and diagnoses are supported. So that's there's plenty of capital and demand going to that side. We see that's going to lead to more types of molecular testing, the sort of NGS in that area, as well as just in general all the other tools. And we've seen some pretty nice innovations in that area. Gene editing is an interesting one. This is one that's probably a more investable opportunity for us than most, because it has been really hit hard in the capital markets. So companies have raised lots of money and a lot of promise, and the investments have done poorly. But in the clinic, it's made great advances. It's rare to find that opportunity, right? Typically, it's often for the market to be out ahead of something, but usually in this case, it feels like it's gone so far, it's fallen behind. We're seeing in the cell therapy and gene therapy modalities, gene editing is a big part of it. They're finding new ways to deliver, new ways to QC it, more standardization around it, allowing for more progress in the clinic. But meanwhile, the perception is it's a bad market because, frankly, it's a little smaller than people thought. Is one of the issues, right? They got first-gen products onto the market in a CAR T that were really clunky, but they worked. And so the second-gen product's probably going to work better. It's probably going to be less expensive to make. But now you have all these companies that are worth a lot less than they were when the first gen was coming out. So that's something we're really got our eyes on, whether it's as a service play or a tool or a reagent type play. And the last one would be, this goes back to changes at the NIH. There is a new division within it. There's a new prioritization. There's a new budget for getting into non-animal testing. This has been a long time coming. We'll continue to do testing on animals for toxicity. You're trying to measure efficacy in humans. But one area they highlighted was in monoclonal antibody testing. And it makes sense. You're using like a human immune system to try to treat a human. Why is an animal really even involved in that process? But it was essentially mandated in a practical sense. And so to be able to come out and kind of go with more direct spheroids, organoids, these areas are going to grow quickly. It's a relatively small market, but the overall idea of predictive toxicology is a big market and has a lot of value. So we see that as an area that's been underinvested in historically. It's going to probably never kind of go back to the old ways.
So it's here at Science and Medicine Group, we collect a lot of different market intelligence and data, and our clients are constantly requesting new insights. From what you've been saying, from what you're experiencing now, looking to the future, what are data points and insights that you're looking for?
I mean, we're still being careful because of the capital market. So our number one thing right now is to make sure there's a capital efficient mindset in everybody going forward. We all know this market will turn. The first part of it, the data that we'll look for, it'll be when the biotechs are raising money again. In that capital markets, that's the driver. When they're having access to capital, they're spending on the most innovative areas of our space, and that always works itself through. The NIH could take a while, and pharma, they have the money and the resources. I think we're not as worried about that as one of the pillars. So within that, waiting for that to happen is a major theme. How do you spend your time and your money while you're waiting for sort of the tide to rise? It's this efficiency idea of how can we get data more effectively, more quickly? What exactly are the customers looking for? We don't have the money to, fail once and then try it again because the markets are just going to be unforgiving. So our advice is get as much data as you can up front, hit the bullseye on your first try, and and have reasonable projections as you go forward. I think if people do that, and it takes time to get product market fit, but when you get it, and again, as a background, our market is ultimately growing, right? The need for healthcare and new tools and more efficiency within the drug development process is undisputed, right? And so some of this is just about being able to stay in the game and be be careful about how you're playing it.
Great. Well, we've always appreciated your optimism about the marketplace and
I'm right
also,
half the time.
And I want to thank you, Bill, for stopping by here at Science and Medicine Group, and we'll hope to see you around very shortly again.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
So thank you for listening, and if you want to learn more, please go to scienceandmedicinegroup.com.